I found my suitcases on the porch in the rain, not beside the door where someone might have set them down by mistake, thinking I was leaving for a trip. They were at the bottom of the steps, where they had clearly been carried and placed with intention. My winter coat draped over the smaller one, already darkening with water. I stood there holding my keys. The house keys I'd been given 6 months ago when I moved in after my hip surgery. The keys I'd used every day since, letting myself in quietly when I returned from physical therapy or my walks, trying not to disturb anyone, and understood that they no longer opened anything that mattered. The door was locked. I knew without trying it. I could feel the weight of that closed door, the way you feel weather changing in your bones. 47 years I'd been a mother, 32 years a grandmother. 6 months I'd been whatever this was: guest, burden, tenant, resource. Now I was none of those things. I was a woman standing in the rain, looking at her possessions on someone else's porch, and the door behind me stayed closed. I should explain how I got here. Not to the porch, that path was clear enough now, but to the place where my daughter could look at me and see only what I could provide, where my son-in-law could add up my pension on his spreadsheet and decide it wasn't enough, where I could become invisible except when they needed something from me. It had started simply enough, the way these things always do. I'd fallen on the ice outside my apartment last February, shattered my hip, spent 3 weeks in the hospital followed by 6 weeks of rehabilitation. When the therapist said I'd need help at home for a few months, Janine didn't hesitate. "Move in with us, Mom. We've got the space. The kids would love it. It's just temporary until you're back on your feet." I'd hesitated. Something in me, some small voice I'd learned to ignore over decades of being useful, being needed, being the one who helped, had whispered a warning. But Janine's eyes had been so earnest, so concerned, and I'd brushed the voice aside. "Just temporary," I'd agreed. The first month had been almost pleasant. I had the guest room with its own bathroom, and I'd helped where I could, folding laundry with my good hand while my hip healed, reading to my youngest grandson Aidan before bed, listening to my granddaughter Chloe practice her violin. Small ways of earning my keep, of being useful rather than simply taking up space. But then my son-in-law Marcus had lost his job. Not fired, he'd explained carefully, restructured, downsized, a victim of market forces beyond his control. He'd find something soon. He had applications out. The severance would tide them over. Except it didn't. By month 3, I'd noticed Janine's face growing tight when she looked at bills, Marcus's voice taking on an edge when he talked about expenses. The house had never been cheap. They'd stretched to buy it, wanting the good school district, the big yard, the neighbourhood with trees and sidewalks where children could ride bikes safely. Now every part of that house seemed to cost something. The mortgage, the utilities, the insurance, the repairs that couldn't be deferred. I'd offered to contribute. Of course I'd offered. I wasn't a guest anymore. I could see that in how they'd stopped asking if I needed anything, stopped knocking before entering my room, stopped saying thank you when I cooked dinner or watched Aidan or ran the vacuum, one-handed and slow, over the living room carpet. Just for groceries, I'd said, and maybe some of the utilities. I'm using water and electricity too. Marcus had looked at Janine. Something had passed between them, some silent conversation I wasn't part of. That would help, Diane, Janine had said quietly. That would really help. I'd given them $300 from my pension that month. The next month it was $400. By month 5, they'd asked for my pension card, just temporarily, just to make it easier to manage the household expenses together, to make sure everything was covered fairly. I'd given it to them. The small voice had screamed this time, but I'd given it anyway, because what else could I do? Where else could I go? My hips still ached when I walked too far. My apartment lease had been given up months ago. My things were in storage except for what fit in the guest room, and even those were increasingly mixed with Janine's overflow boxes of Chloe's old clothes waiting to be donated, Marcus's golf clubs he never used anymore, broken electronics waiting for a repair that would never come. I'd become a space to put things, a resource to extract from, and I'd let it happen, one small yes at a time, until the day Marcus had sat me down at the kitchen table with his laptop open to a spreadsheet. "We need to talk about your contribution," he'd said. Contribution. As if I hadn't been paying $600 a month from my pension, hadn't been cooking most dinners, hadn't been watching Aidan after school every day so Janine could work her part-time job, as if I hadn't slowly erased myself to fit into the corners of their lives. The spreadsheet had shown household expenses broken down by person. Marcus, Janine, Chloe, Aidan, and at the bottom, Diane. Next to my name, TBD, to be determined, Marcus had explained, as if I might not understand the abbreviation. "We need to figure out fair rent for your room, plus your share of utilities, food, household supplies. We've been generous so far, but with the job situation, we need to make sure everyone is pulling their weight." Pulling their weight. I had weighed 98 pounds when I left the rehab facility. I weighed 92 pounds now. "How much?" I'd asked. $1,400 a month, Marcus had said. That's below market for a room with a private bath in this neighbourhood. Below market? My entire pension was $1,600 a month. I'd looked at Janine. She'd been staring at her hands, folding and refolding a dish towel, the way she used to do as a teenager when she was anxious or hiding something. "Janine," I'd said quietly. She hadn't looked up. "It's fair, Mom. We really need it." Fair. $1,400 a month to live in a room in my daughter's house, to be invisible except when they needed my pension or my labour, to exist at the edges of their family without quite being part of it. I'd said no. The word had come out smaller than I'd meant it to, barely louder than a breath, but Marcus had heard it clearly enough. His face had changed, something cold moving behind his eyes.
"Then I'm sorry, but we can't house you for free," he'd said. "You'll need to make other arrangements."
And Janine, my daughter, who I'd rocked through nightmares, who I'd taught to ride a bike and braid her hair and balance a checkbook, who I'd helped pay for college and whose wedding I'd covered when her father had refused to contribute, Janine had said nothing at all. That had been 3 days ago. For 3 days, I'd stayed in my room except to use the bathroom, existing in a silence so thick it had texture, weight, presence. No one had knocked on my door. No one had called me for meals. Aidan had stopped coming to my room to show me his homework or his Lego creations. It was as if I had already disappeared, as if the process of being erased had simply been made official. This morning I'd heard Marcus and Janine leave for the day. Marcus to a job interview he'd mentioned at breakfast 3 days ago, back when we still pretended to be a family. Janine to work. The house had been empty except for the sound of my own breathing. I'd packed my suitcases quietly, carefully, taking only what was truly mine: clothes, toiletries, the framed photo of my husband Robert, who died 8 years ago, the jewellery box he'd given me for our 30th anniversary. I'd left behind everything that had become entangled with their lives: the coffee maker I'd bought because theirs had broken, the set of pots and pans I'd contributed to replace their scratched non-stick ones, the books I'd been reading from their shelves. I'd written a note, short, clean, no accusations, no explanation. "I'll pick up my things from storage when I have an address. Diane." I'd left it on the kitchen counter, taken my suitcases to the garage, loaded them into my car, the car that was still mine, that I'd kept paying insurance on even when Marcus had suggested selling it to reduce expenses. I'd gone back inside for my purse, my medication, my winter coat, and when I'd returned to the garage, the door to the house had been locked behind me. Not accidentally, not carelessly, deliberately locked, with my suitcases carried out of the garage and placed on the front porch, where I'd be sure to find them, where the neighbours might see them, where the message was absolutely clear. They'd been home. They'd been in the house the whole time. They'd waited for me to walk out of sight, then locked me out and moved my belongings like I was a stranger, like I was someone they'd hired to do a job who had failed to perform adequately. I'd walked around to the front of the house, and that's where I was now, standing in the rain that had started while I'd made my slow circuit from garage to porch, looking at my life reduced to 3 suitcases and a coat that was no longer waterproof. The door stayed closed. No one came out to explain, to apologize, to ask if I needed help carrying my bags to the car. The windows were dark except for a glow from the kitchen, and I realized I could see Janine's silhouette there, standing motionless, watching me without opening the door. I picked up the first suitcase. It was heavy. I'd packed my winter clothes, my extra shoes, the things I'd need if I was going to be anywhere that wasn't here. My hip protested as I lifted it, a sharp reminder that I wasn't fully healed, that I was 73 years old, with a body that had already been through too much. I carried it to my car anyway, came back for the second suitcase, then the third, then my coat. The rain soaked through my sweater, cold and methodical, but I didn't hurry. I moved with the same careful deliberation I'd learned in physical therapy. Step, breathe, step. Refusing to stumble, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me struggle. When everything was loaded into my car, I stood for a moment with my hand on the driver's door, looking back at the house one last time. The kitchen light clicked off. Janine's silhouette disappeared. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away from my daughter's house with nowhere to go and no one expecting me. And all I felt was a strange, weightless relief that I no longer had to pretend I was wanted there. I drove to Ruthie's house without calling first. Ruthie Crawford had been my friend for 42 years, since our daughters had been in kindergarten together and we'd met at a PTA meeting about playground equipment. We'd raised our children in parallel, celebrated graduations and weddings, mourned losses. When Robert had died, Ruthie had shown up at my door every single day for 3 months with food I couldn't eat and company I desperately needed. She answered the door in her gardening clothes, dirt under her fingernails, and took one look at my face before pulling me inside. "Oh, honey," she said, and then, "I'll make tea." That was Ruthie. No interrogation, no demands for explanations, just tea and a safe place to sit, and silence that didn't require me to fill it with words I didn't have yet. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where we'd done homework with our girls, planned school fundraisers, played cards on Friday nights when our husbands had been alive and we'd believed our families were building something that would last. Rain drummed against the windows. Steam rose from our cups. Ruthie waited. "Janine locked me out," I finally said. The words sounded impossible, even as I spoke them. "They locked me out of the house." Ruthie's hand tightened around her mug, but her voice stayed level. "You're staying here, as long as you need." That simple. No questions about rent, no calculations of utilities, no spreadsheets determining my worth. Just, "You're staying here." I felt something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, but more like a shell I'd been holding together finally giving way. I started to cry, which I hadn't done on the porch, hadn't done in the car, hadn't let myself do because crying meant accepting that this had actually happened, that my daughter had actually chosen this. Ruthie came around the table and held me while I wept into her shoulder. And I thought about all the times I'd held Janine like this when she'd been small and frightened and convinced the world was ending. How I'd told her it would be okay, that I would always be there, that she was safe. How I'd meant it. How I'd been wrong. When I could breathe again, Ruthie poured more tea and set a box of tissues between us. "Tell me," she said, not demanding, just opening space for whatever I needed to say. So I told her. Not everything, not yet, not in that first hour, but enough. The hip surgery, the temporary arrangement that had stopped being temporary, the slow erosion of being a person into being a function, the spreadsheet with TBD next to my name, the $1,400 they'd wanted from a pension that barely covered $1,600, the locked door, the suitcases in the rain. Ruthie listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with each detail, until by the end she looked like she wanted to drive over to Janine's house and do violence. "What are you going to do?" she asked instead. I looked down at my tea. The surface was still now, perfectly calm, and I could see my own reflection in it, distorted, wavering, but there. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I'm not going back." The words surprised me as I said them. I'd thought I might feel uncertain, might doubt myself, might wonder if I was being too harsh or too proud or too unforgiving. But I felt none of those things. I felt clear, resolved, done. "Good," Ruthie said firmly. "You can stay in the guest room upstairs. I cleared it out last month after my sister visited. Clean sheets, empty closet, all yours for as long as you want it." "Ruthie, I can't." "Yes, you can. And you will. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. Tonight you're just going to be here and be safe, and remember that you're worth more than however they made you feel." I looked at my friend. This woman who had never asked me for my pension, never calculated my value in spreadsheets, never made me earn the right to exist in her presence, and felt something shift in the weighted silence that had followed me from Janine's porch. I wasn't invisible here. I wasn't erased. I was Diane, Ruth's friend of 42 years, and that was enough. We brought my suitcases in from the car together, Ruthie insisting on carrying the heavier ones despite my protests. She showed me to the guest room, a small space with cream walls and a window overlooking her garden, the bed already made with a blue quilt I remembered from years ago. "There are towels in the bathroom across the hall," Ruthie said. "Take a hot shower, change into dry clothes. I'm making soup for dinner, and you're going to eat something, even if you think you can't." She left me alone then, closing the door with a soft click that was nothing like the deliberate lock of Janine's door, and I stood in the middle of that quiet room and felt my body begin to understand what my mind already knew. I was free of them. The relief was so intense it was almost painful. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Not my bed, but a bed I was welcome in a house where I didn't have to justify my existence or calculate my worth, and let myself feel the full weight of what had just happened. They had thrown me out. My daughter and her husband had literally put my belongings outside and locked the door against me, and I had nowhere to live and no plan, and a body that still ached from an injury I'd sustained 7 months ago. And yet, I wasn't trapped anymore. I wasn't performing gratitude for being tolerated. I wasn't erasing myself to fit into corners of someone else's life. I was just myself, in a safe place, with a friend who had never once asked me to be less than I was. Tomorrow I would think about what came next, about finding an apartment, about retrieving my things from storage, about lawyers and bank accounts and all the practical matters of building a life separate from people who had made me feel like a burden. Tomorrow I would make plans. Tonight I was just going to be here, in this room with cream walls and a window overlooking the garden, and let myself rest without calculating whether I'd earned it. I heard Ruthie moving around downstairs, heard the sound of pots and the low murmur of the television. Normal sounds, safe sounds, sounds that didn't require anything from me except that I exist. I took off my damp sweater and hung it over the back of a chair, unpacked my medications and lined them up on the dresser. Opened the window slightly to let in fresh air that smelled like rain and earth, and the honeysuckle that grew along Ruthie's back fence. The silence here was different, not weighted with judgment or expectation, just quiet. The good kind of quiet, where you can hear yourself think. I thought about Janine standing in her kitchen, watching me carry my suitcases to the car, never opening the door. I thought about Marcus and his spreadsheet, calculating my worth in dollars and finding it insufficient. I thought about the 6 months I'd spent trying to be small enough, useful enough, invisible enough to justify my existence in their house. I thought about all of it and felt something harden in me. Not anger exactly, anger would come later, I was sure of that, but something more fundamental, a decision. They had taught me, without meaning to, that I was expendable, temporary, conditional. I was going to teach myself something different, starting now. Starting here, in Ruthie's guest room, with nothing but 3 suitcases and a pension they'd tried to take, and a body that was still healing but strong enough to carry me forward. I was 73 years old, and I was done disappearing for anyone's convenience. On Monday morning, I called the bank. The woman who answered transferred me to a supervisor named Patricia Chen, who listened without interrupting as I explained that I needed to change all my account authorizations immediately. "I'll need you to come in person for that," Patricia said, her voice professional but not unkind. "Can you be here at 10? I could. I was. The bank was a 20-minute drive from Ruthie's house, and I arrived 15 minutes early, which gave me time to sit in the parking lot and steady my hands on the steering wheel. This was the first concrete step, the first action that would make separation real. Patricia met me at the door, a slight woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain. She led me to a private office and closed the door behind us. "Your daughter has had access to your accounts for 6 months," she said, pulling up my information on her computer. "She's made regular withdrawals. The pension deposits come in on the 1st of each month, and she typically withdraws $500 to $600 within 24 hours. $500 to $600. Not the $400 I'd thought I was giving, not even close."
"How much total?"
My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Patricia's fingers moved across her keyboard.
"Since April, approximately $3,800.
I did the math automatically. My pension was $1,600 a month. Over 6 months, I should have had $9,600 deposited. Minus the amounts I'd explicitly agreed to give them, $300, then $400, I should have had nearly $7,000 in my account.
How much do I have now?
I asked.
$842.16.
The number hung in the air between us. $800, half a month's pension. Everything else gone, taken, spent on their mortgage, their utilities, their lives. I felt something cold and clear settle in my chest. Not surprise, not even anger yet, just clarity. I want her removed from all my accounts, I said, today. Patricia nodded. I'll need to see your ID and have you fill out some forms. I can also set up alerts so you're notified of any transaction over a certain amount. And she paused, choosing her words carefully. If you're planning on making other changes, I'd recommend setting up a trust. It's more secure than joint accounts, and it lets you specify exactly how and when funds are distributed. I have a granddaughter, I said. Chloe. She's 16. I want to set up something for her college, not accessible by her parents. Patricia's expression didn't change, but I saw understanding in her eyes. I can help with that. Let me get the forms. It took 2 hours to complete everything. Forms to remove Janine's access. Forms to change my debit card. Forms to set up transaction alerts. Forms to establish a trust for Chloe with specific conditions, accessible only after age 18, only for education expenses, only by Chloe herself. I funded it with $500. It wasn't much, but it was something. A promise that even if her parents had failed to protect me, I would still protect her. When Patricia walked me out, she handed me a business card with a name written on the back. Francis Morrison. He's an estate attorney, very thorough, very discreet. If you need other documents revised, he can help. I looked at the card. The name was written in blue ink, in handwriting that looked like it belonged to someone who made careful decisions. Thank you, I said. Patricia touched my arm briefly. We see this more often than you'd think. Adult children with access to elderly parents' finances, it rarely ends well. You're doing the right thing. I drove back to Ruth's with a new debit card in my wallet, transaction alerts set up on my phone, and a trust account that would send my granddaughter to college even if her parents spent every other penny I had. Small victories, legal boundaries. My money was mine again. That was step 1. Step 2 would be harder. Francis Morrison's office was in an old converted house downtown, the kind with crown moulding and hardwood floors that creaked in a way that felt honest rather than cheap. He was older than I expected, perhaps 80, with silver hair and hands that trembled slightly as he poured coffee I didn't drink. But his eyes were sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Patricia Chen called ahead, he said. She mentioned you needed to revoke a power of attorney. Yes. I set my purse on the chair beside me. and change my will. Francis pulled a legal pad toward him and wrote the date at the top in careful script. Walk me through the situation. Everything relevant. So I did. The hip surgery, the temporary arrangement, the pension card, the spreadsheet, the locked door, the $3,800 taken from my account. The years before that, the slow erosion of boundaries, the way I'd been taught to feel grateful for being tolerated. He took notes without commentary, occasionally asking for clarification, dates, amounts, specific names. When I finished, he set his pen down and looked at me over his glasses. Your daughter has had general power of attorney for 6 months, he said. That document gives her authority over your medical and financial decisions if you're incapacitated. Were you incapacitated? No. Then she exceeded her authority. The financial withdrawals constitute conversion, essentially theft, though prosecuting family members is complicated and rarely worth the emotional cost. I'm not here to tell you what to do about your relationship with your daughter. I'm here to make sure she can never do this to you again. Understood? Understood. Good. Francis pulled up documents on his computer, his trembling fingers surprisingly quick on the keyboard. I'll draft a revocation of power of attorney, effective immediately. I'll also draft a new will and advance directive. Who do you want as your healthcare proxy? I thought of Ruthie, steady and clear-headed. Ruth Crawford, my friend. Good choice. And your will? Current beneficiaries? Just Janine. The words tasted bitter. Everything goes to her. And you'd like to change that? Yes. I took a breath. I want my granddaughter Chloe to inherit, not her parents, just her. And I want to make sure they can't access it or control it. Francis nodded, making notes. I'll set up a trust. Trustee Ruth Crawford, I said again. All right. He looked up at me. This is legally straightforward. Emotionally, it's permanent. If you cut your daughter out of your will, there's no easy path back. Are you certain? I thought about Janine watching me from her kitchen window, never opening the door. I thought about Marcus's spreadsheet and the word TBD next to my name. I thought about 6 months of being erased, one small theft at a time. I'm certain. Then we'll proceed. The documents took an hour to prepare, review, and sign. Francis explained each one carefully, making sure I understood what I was signing and why. 2 witnesses came in from the outer office to verify my signature. Everything was methodical, official, irreversible. When it was done, Francis handed me copies in a manila folder. Keep these somewhere safe, he said. I'll file the revocation with the appropriate authorities and send a copy to your daughter by certified mail. She'll know her access is terminated. Good. And Diane? He walked me to the door. You did the right thing. Protecting yourself isn't cruelty, it's survival. That afternoon, I went apartment hunting. Ruthie came with me, insisting on driving while I looked at listings on my phone. We saw 4 apartments. 3 were terrible, dark, cramped, smelling of mildew or old cooking. The 4th was a studio on the second floor of a renovated building, with a small kitchen, a bathroom that had been updated recently, and 2 tall windows that let in afternoon light. "I'll take it," I told the landlord. He looked uncertain. "I need first month, last month, and a security deposit, and I'll need to run a credit check." I pulled out my checkbook, the new one the bank had issued that morning, with my name alone on the checks. "Will this work as a deposit while you process everything else?" He looked at the check, then at me. "Move-in date would be the 15th. That's 2 weeks. Perfect." I signed the lease that evening at Ruthie's kitchen table, my signature steady and clear. My own apartment, my own space, my own life, starting again at 73 with nothing but determination and a pension no one else can touch. The letter arrived 3 days after Francis sent the certified revocation. Ruthie brought it to me while I was packing the last of my things for the move. The envelope had Janine's handwriting on it, neat, controlled, the same handwriting she'd used for thank you notes after her wedding. I opened it standing in the guest room, Ruthie hovering nearby in case I needed her. "Mum, Marcus told me about the lawyer. I don't understand why you're doing this. We were trying to help you. You were the one who offered to contribute. We never forced you to do anything. I think you're being very unfair and hurtful, especially after everything we've done for you. If you would just talk to us like an adult instead of running away, we could work this out. You're still welcome to come back. We can figure out an arrangement that works for everyone. Love, Janine." I read it twice. Not a single apology, not a single acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just accusations disguised as concern, wrapped in the language of reasonableness. You were the one who offered, as if I'd had any real choice. Everything we've done for you, as if I hadn't paid and paid and paid. Talk to us like an adult, as if I were the child here throwing a tantrum over nothing. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope, carried it to my suitcase and placed it at the very bottom, underneath my clothes where I wouldn't have to see it. "Not answering?" Ruthie asked. "Not today. Maybe not ever." The new apartment smelled like fresh paint and the pine cleaner the landlord had used on the floors. Empty except for the few pieces of furniture I'd bought second-hand. A bed, a small table, 2 chairs, a reading lamp. It looked stark and temporary. I didn't care. It was mine. I spent the first afternoon unpacking, finding places for everything. My medications on the bathroom shelf, my clothes in the narrow closet, Robert's photo on the bedside table, his face forever 59, forever the age he'd been when his heart had given out while mowing the lawn. "What do you think?" I asked him silently. "Did I do the right thing?" He smiled at me from the frame, and I imagined what he would have said if he'd been here. "About damn time, Diane." That evening, I sat in my new chair by the window and watched the street below. people walking dogs, a couple pushing a stroller, 2 teenagers on skateboards, life moving forward without me, which was fine. I wasn't looking to be part of anyone else's life anymore. I was looking to be part of my own. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Grandma, it's Chloe. Mum gave me your number. Can I visit you?" I stared at the message for a long time. Chloe, 16 years old, caught in the middle of something she hadn't created and couldn't fix. The one person in that house I genuinely missed. I texted back, "Yes, but not at your house. Come here." I sent her the address and waited, wondering if Janine would allow it, wondering if Chloe would be used as a messenger or a guilt trip or a bargaining chip. The response came immediately. "Saturday at 2, just me, see you then." I set the phone down and looked around my empty apartment and felt something loosen in my chest. Not hope exactly, not forgiveness, just possibility. Marcus called on Thursday. I was measuring the kitchen window for curtains when my phone rang, an unknown number I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Diane, it's Marcus. Please don't hang up." I said nothing. Waited. "Look, I know things got heated before you left. I think there were misunderstandings on both sides. Janine's really upset. She misses you. The kids miss you. Why don't you come over for dinner this weekend and we can talk this through? Clear the air?" His voice was reasonable, conciliatory, the voice of someone who genuinely believed he'd done nothing wrong, that this was all just a communication problem that could be solved with a conversation. "No," I said. "Diane, come on. We're family. Family works through things. You locked me out of your house. You had my daughter stand at the window and watch me carry my suitcases in the rain without opening the door. That's not family. That's not," he stopped, regrouped. "That's not how it happened. You left. You packed your things and left, and we were just trying to respect your decision." The lie was breathtaking in its completeness. As if I'd imagined the locked garage door, the suitcases moved to the porch, Janine's silhouette in the kitchen window. "I'm not coming to dinner," I said. "Don't call this number again." I hung up before he could respond and blocked the number immediately. My hands were shaking. Not from anger exactly, from the recognition that he would never admit what he'd done, that Janine would never stand up to him, that they would rewrite history until they were the wounded parties and I was the unreasonable old woman who'd abandoned them. I didn't care anymore. Let them have their version. I had the truth. Saturday afternoon, Chloe arrived at my apartment carrying a bakery box. She'd gotten taller since I'd last seen her 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was just that I was seeing her differently, not as Janine's daughter, but as her own person, separate and real. "I brought cookies," she said, holding out the box, "from that place you like, the one with the chocolate chip ones that are still warm." I took the box and stood back to let her in. "Thank you, come in." She looked around the apartment, taking in the bare walls, the second-hand furniture, the single-potted plant I'd bought to make the windowsill less empty. "It's small," she said. Then quickly, I mean, it's nice, it's really nice. I like the light. So do I. I set the cookies on the table. Tea? Coffee? Tea's good. We sat across from each other at my small table, and I waited for her to say whatever she'd come to say. She picked at the edge of her paper napkin, gathering words. Mum says you're mad at us, she finally said. She says you won't talk to her because you're punishing her for asking you to help with expenses. Is that true? So that was the story they'd told. Not eviction, not exploitation, just a misunderstanding about expenses. Did your mother tell you how much she wanted me to pay? I asked. Chloe shook her head. $1,400 a month. My entire pension is $1,600. Her eyes widened. But that's everything, I finished. That's everything I have to live on. And when I said no, they put my suitcases on the porch and locked me out. Chloe looked down at her tea. I didn't know. They said you just decided to leave, that you were mad about being asked to contribute. I paid $600 a month for 6 months, I said. I cooked most meals. I watched your brother every day after school. I was contributing. What I wasn't willing to do was give them everything and have nothing left for myself. I'm sorry, Chloe said quietly. I didn't know it was like that. I'm really sorry. You don't need to apologize for them, I said. This isn't your fault. We drank our tea, ate cookies, talked about her violin lessons, her college applications, her plans to study music. Small, normal things that had nothing to do with her parents or money or locked doors. When she left, she hugged me hard. Can I come back next week? Anytime, I told her. You're always welcome here. After she left, I found a second letter from Janine in my mailbox. This one was longer, more careful. Mum, I've had time to think about everything. I know things got complicated, and I know I should have done more to protect you. I was scared about money, about Marcus's job, about losing the house. I let that fear make me blind to what was happening to you. That was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm working on being better. If you're willing, I'd like to try again. Not right away, when you're ready. I love you, Janine. I read it 3 times. It was better than the first letter. Honest, or close to it. But it was also 6 months too late, and apologies didn't erase what had been done. I put it in the drawer with the first letter and went back to my life. 3 weeks after I moved into my apartment, Chloe visited for the 4th time. We'd fallen into a rhythm. She came on Saturdays, brought food or flowers, and we talked about her life without mentioning her parents unless she wanted to. I'd started teaching her to make Robert's lasagna, the one with the bechamel sauce he'd perfected over years of Sunday dinners. Today she was quiet, distracted, stirring the sauce without her usual running commentary about school or orchestra or the college applications she'd finally submitted. What is it? I asked. She kept stirring. Mum wants to see you. I got her letters, I know, but she wants to actually see you, talk to you. She's... Chloe paused, searching for words. She's different now, not as stressed. Marcus got a new job, they're not drowning anymore, and I think she really understands what she did wrong. I tasted the sauce, added basil. Different how? She asks me about you, what we talk about, if you're okay. She doesn't make excuses anymore, she just misses you. Chloe turned to face me. I'm not trying to push you. I know you need space, but maybe, just maybe, you could think about it. I looked at my granddaughter, this girl who'd somehow navigated her parents' mistakes and my hurt and managed to build something new with me, something based on choice rather than obligation. I'll think about it, I said. The knock on my door came 2 hours after Chloe left. I looked through the peephole and saw Janine standing in the hallway, holding nothing, wearing a coat I didn't recognize. She looked older, tired. I opened the door. Hi, Mom. Her voice was tentative. Chloe told me where you live. I hope that's okay. I didn't invite her in, didn't step back, just stood in the doorway and waited. I know you got my letters, Janine continued. I know they weren't enough, words aren't enough, but I need you to know that I see it now. I see what we did to you, what I let Marcus do, what I did by staying silent. She stopped, took a breath. I was so scared of losing the house, of failing, of admitting we were drowning, that I convinced myself using you was acceptable, that it was temporary, that you understood. I did understand, I said. That's why I kept giving, until you asked for everything. I know. Tears were running down her face now, but she didn't wipe them away. I know, and I can't undo it. I can't take back watching you carry your bags in the rain and not opening the door. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't fix it, but I'm asking if I can try. Not now, not today. Whenever you're ready. If you're ever ready. I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who had learned the wrong lessons from my sacrifices and nearly destroyed both of us because of it. I'm not coming back, I said. Not to your house, not to that life. I'm here now, and I'm staying here, I know. And I'm not giving you money. I'm not watching Aidan. I'm not cooking your dinners or being the grandmother you call when you need something. Those terms are done. I know. But, I said slowly, if you want to have coffee sometime, just the two of us, without Marcus, without expectations, without me being useful, maybe we could try that. Hope flickered in Janine's eyes. Really? Maybe. I didn't soften it. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if we'll ever be what we were. But I'm willing to see if we can be something new. Janine nodded, wiping her face with her sleeve. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. She turned to leave, then stopped. Mum, I'm proud of you for leaving, for protecting yourself, for teaching me that there are limits, even with family. I watched her walk down the hallway, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell, and felt something shift in the weighted silence that had followed me since that day in the rain. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation, just possibility. After she left, I went to my closet and pulled out the old notebook I'd kept for years, the one where I'd written everything I'd given them, everything I'd sacrificed, a running tally of my own erasure. I ripped the pages out one by one, tore them into pieces and threw them in the trash. I didn't need to remember anymore, didn't need to keep score. That version of myself, the one who calculated worth in usefulness, who believed love required constant sacrifice, was done. I was someone new now, someone who chose her own boundaries and lived inside them without apology. 6 months after I left Janine's house, I invited Chloe for dinner at my apartment. Not because I had to, not because anyone expected it, because I wanted to. She arrived with flowers daisies from the farmer's market, and I put them in a mason jar on my small table. We made pasta together, her hands more confident now with the knife, with the timing, with the quiet rhythms of cooking alongside someone who wasn't keeping score. Halfway through dinner, there was a knock at the door. Janine stood in the hallway, empty-handed this time too. We'd had coffee twice since her first visit, brief, careful conversations in neutral territory, not easy, not warm, but real. "Chloe told me you were cooking together," Janine said. "I hoped I could join you, if that's okay." I looked at Chloe, who was watching me with cautious hope. Looked at Janine, who wasn't demanding anything, wasn't assuming anything, was just asking. "There's enough pasta," I said. "Come in." We ate together at my small table, the three of us, and talked about small things, Chloe's college acceptances, the spring weather, a movie Janine had seen. Nothing about money, nothing about the past, just the present, careful and new. When they left, Janine hugged me carefully. "Thank you for letting me try." "Keep trying," I said. "That's all I ask." After they left, I stood at my window and watched the street below. The couple with the stroller had a toddler now, walking beside them with uncertain steps. The teenagers on skateboards had been replaced by different teenagers. Life moved forward, whether you participated or not. I'd chosen to participate again, but on my own terms. The apartment that had seemed stark and temporary 6 months ago had become mine. Curtains I'd chosen on the windows. Plants I'd bought and managed to keep alive on the sill. Books on the shelf that were there because I'd selected them, not because they'd been left behind by someone else. A chair positioned exactly where I wanted it, with nothing piled on it except the blanket I used when I sat there reading. Everything in this space was intentional, chosen, mine. I'd lost things to get here. The relationship with my daughter would never be what it had been, couldn't be, shouldn't be. That version was built on my silence, my service, my willingness to disappear. This new version was built on boundaries and honesty and the understanding that love doesn't require martyrdom. It was smaller, more fragile, but it was real. I'd lost the fantasy of being needed, of being essential to my family's survival. But I'd gained something more fundamental, the knowledge that I could survive on my own, that my worth wasn't tied to my usefulness, that I was a person separate from my role as mother or grandmother or convenient resource. The price had been high. The loneliness in those first weeks at Ruthie's had been crushing, the silence in my new apartment heavy as stone. There were mornings when I woke up and forgot where I was, reached for a routine that didn't exist anymore. There were nights when I lay awake wondering if I'd been too harsh, too unforgiving, too willing to burn bridges rather than build them. But then I'd remember the suitcases in the rain, the locked door, the spreadsheet with TBD next to my name, and I'd know that I'd made the only choice I could live with. I was 73 years old, and I'd finally learnt to choose myself. If you're reading this and you see yourself in my story, if you're the one who always says yes, who always makes room, who always gives more than you have because asking for boundaries feels like selfishness, I want you to know something. Your silence isn't kindness, it's self-abandonment. Your no isn't cruelty, it's self-protection. Your boundaries aren't rejection, they're respect for yourself and ultimately for the people who learn to honor them. You don't owe your family your financial security, your dignity, or your peace. You don't owe them your yes when yes means you disappear. Love doesn't require you to erase yourself. Real love makes space for both people to exist. It's never too late to reclaim yourself. Never too late to say enough. Never too late to build a life on your own terms, even if it means walking away from people who've made you believe you exist to serve them. I did it at 73, with a body that had already been through too much, with nothing but a pension and determination and the stubborn belief that I deserved to be treated like a person rather than a resource. If I can do it, so can you. It won't be easy. There will be loneliness and doubt and people who tell you you're wrong, selfish, ungrateful. There will be nights when you question everything, mornings when you wonder if you should have tried harder, stayed longer, given more. But there will also be mornings when you wake up in a space that's yours, where no one is taking inventory of your usefulness, where you don't have to justify your existence or calculate your worth, where you can sit by a window with sunlight on your face and know that you chose this, that you built this, that you're here because you decided your life mattered more than their comfort. That's worth fighting for. You're worth fighting for. I sit in my chair by the window now, the one with the blue cushion I bought because I liked it, with nothing piled on it except the blanket I chose. The late afternoon sun comes through the glass, warm on my face, and I can hear the sounds of the street below, children playing, someone's music drifting from an open window. The ordinary sounds of life continuing. My phone buzzes. A text from Chloe. Dinner next week? I'll bring ingredients for that lasagna recipe. I text back, yes. Saturday at 5? Perfect. Love you, Grandma. I set the phone down and look around my small apartment, my space, my rules, my life, and feel something I haven't felt in longer than I can remember. Peace. Not happiness exactly, not the uncomplicated joy of a life without losses, but something deeper, more honest. The peace of knowing I'm exactly where I chose to be, with people I chose to have in my life, on terms I chose to accept. The peace of taking up space without apology. The peace of being visible again, to myself if no one else. I am 73 years old. I am alone in a small apartment with second-hand furniture and a pension no one else can touch. I have a daughter I may never fully forgive, and a granddaughter who chose me anyway, and a friend who gave me sanctuary without conditions. I have a life I built from nothing after losing everything I thought I needed. And that life is enough. I am enough, just as I am, just as I choose to be. The sun sets beyond my window, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and I sit here in my chosen space and watch it, grateful for this moment, this peace, this hard-won autonomy. I sit here and I am free.